hope she makes you smile the way it made me smile on the other end of the phone, in the middle of a highway driving alone. Oh baby, I hope you hear a song that makes you sing along and get to think about her. Then the last 7 miles turn into a blur. I hope you both feel the sparks by the end of the drive. I hope you know she's the one by the end of the night. Hope you never ever felt more free. Tell your friends you're so happy. I hope she comes along her ex every one of your plans. I hope you spend your last time to put a rock on her hand. Hope she's wilder than your wildest dreams. She's everything you're ever gonna need. And then I hope she cheats like you did on me. And then I hope she cheats like you did on me. Yeah, then I hope she shows up in a 2 a.m. pic from a friend, hanging on to a guy. You just say him. I hope you stay up all night, all alone, watching by the phone. And then she calls, and baby, I hope you work it out. Forgive and just about forget, and take her on a first date again. And when you're leaning for a kiss, I hope you both feel the sparks by the end of the drive. I hope you know she's the one by the end of the night. Hope you never ever felt more free. Tell your friends that you're so happy. I hope she comes along her ex every one of your plans. Hope you spend your last time to put a rock on her hand. Hope she's wilder than your wildest dreams. Everything you're ever gonna need. And then I hope she cheats like you did on me. And then I hope she cheats like you did on me. I hope her clothes come all the way around. I hope she makes you feel the same way about her that I feel about you right now. I hope you both feel the sparks by the end of the drive. Hope you know she's the one by the end of the night. Hope you never ever felt more free. Tell your friends that you're so happy. I hope she comes along her ex every one of your plans. Hope you spend your last time to put a rock on her hand. Hope she's wilder than your wildest dreams. Everything you're ever gonna need. And then I hope she cheats like you did on me. And then I hope she cheats like you did on me. Like you did on me.
Hey, I'm Vince, and I'm your host today, and we're talking about those people, those mean people that wish bad things into our lives. And while we try to avoid them, we don't always know what to do with them. So today we're talking about mean people and what to do about them. So if you know any people that are mean, stick around. Now, before we jump into that, we'd love to hear from you. And the best way to do this is to scan the QR code and take a moment to tell us about yourself. And if it's your first time with us, let us know that, and we'll have a gift headed this week to you in the mail. As you're doing that, a couple ways to connect outside the weekend service that I want to tell you about. First, we've got a really cool opportunity to do some good in the community by helping students go back to school in style this fall through a new partnership with one of our local schools. Now, 2 ways you can participate. You can either stop by the Cross Point Commons and pick up a shopping tag with these individual back-to-school clothing items, or if you'd rather make a donation, let us do the shopping. Just hit this QR code to make a donation and choose the designation Back to School in Style, and we'll do the shopping for you. Check it out today and anytime between now and July 14th. All right, people, we had an amazing evening at Carpool Cinema this past weekend. And if you missed it, you've got another opportunity headed your way on Friday, July 12th for the amazing film Top Gun Maverick, drive-in movie style. This is a free event, and it's also a great opportunity to invite someone to join you at our campus. So invite some friends and bring your people and come early. Tailgate, bike, skate, drive, or even walk over, and let's make a night of it. Be sure to let us and your friends know that you're coming on Facebook. The parking lot opens at 8 and the movie starts at dusk. Next, the 4th of July holiday weekend is just 2 weekends away. And we want you to know that Crosspoint is going to be online only that weekend. That's right, July 4th and 7th. We're only going to be online that weekend as a way to show appreciation for our incredible volunteers who volunteer each Thursday and Sunday and make this an amazing place week in and week out. So, we'll not be hosting an in-person service for children or students or adults over the Independence Weekend. So enjoy the holiday weekend and tune in from wherever you're celebrating at crosspointweb.org/watch. Last, we're getting ready to go public with the Crosspoint Investment Group this week. And if you're interested in finding more about how you can participate in the Crosspoint Investment Group and how you can do good with your money, receive a good dividend return, and move the kingdom forward, let us know at this QR code or on your connection card, and we'll get you in the communication loop this week. All right, we've got a great service for you today. You know, it's easy to want to get even with mean people, but what if we could do better? What if we could do better than even? That's where we're headed today. So let's head into the venue and hear what Curt has to say.
Wow, I tell you what, welcome to Crosspoint. I tell you what, if you showed up today, yeah, you can go ahead and grab a seat. If you showed up, I think you're winning today. That was amazing. Can we thank this band one more time? Wow. Wow, I tell you what, we're off to a good start. Man, we're so excited you're here today. My name's Curt, and if you're here for the first time, I think the beginning of a series is always a good time to join a church, check out a church, and we're beginning a brand new series today called Mean People and What to Do About Them. So really excited you're here, and we got a whole bunch of people tuning in online this weekend. Let's make some noise for those. Spend a little time with us on the other side of a screen. So excited to have you join us this weekend. And we're talking about mean people. Anybody got mean people in their life? Just like make some noise if you got mean people in your life. Okay. Yeah, and hopefully it's not the person next to you. Nobody will tell. We all have them, right? I mean, sometimes we're like, am I the only one that just feels like the wrath is always coming toward me, from mean people? And the answer is actually no. In fact, I just think, our world is increasingly more rude and mean and less empathy and less compassion. And so we're going to be talking about what to do about that. Now, any Jimmy Kimmel fans in the house? Anybody watch Jimmy Kimmel? Okay, yeah. So he's got a little bit that he does on his show where it's called Mean Tweets, where people tweet mean things about celebrities, and he has them on his show, and he has them read the mean tweets about themselves, and it's kind of awkward. But we just kind of get a picture of what happens when mean things are said. So take a look at this right here. Oh man, and those were the appropriate ones, just so you know, the less inappropriate ones. And but this is what mean people do, right? Mean people say mean things, and then when we hear those things, we naturally respond. We naturally just fire back. And so, we could have called this series "Bad People and What to Do About Them." We don't like to call people bad, but sometimes people are like, well, I mean, they're not really a bad person. They just say really bad things a lot, which I think is like the definition of what a bad person actually is. And so, we're not going to do bad people. We're going to talk about mean people during this series. And by mean, what we're talking about is unpleasant people, deceptive people, people who are just users of any kind, meaning you see them coming at you, you're at the grocery store, you're at the sports field, and they're walking, and you're like, I just don't want to interact with them, because every time I get in a conversation, I feel like they use me. They're either trying to control my time or money, or maybe even make me feel a bit of shame. And so, there's just no way to say it. These are people who are just mean. And to be clear, I mean, just all cards on the table, I think we have to recognize that, this isn't to say that we're not all mean at times, right? And so, there may be someone who hears this, message this weekend is just like, you come to mind, all right? So we just got to be aware that this doesn't mean that we're not the ones sometimes that are on the other end of this equation. It's just that what we're talking about is how do we live in such a way that we're not the mean people in the world. And the reason that this is so important and the reason we're looking at this is because if you don't have a plan and if you aren't prepared and you're not proactive on this, here's kind of what happens. And I think you've all experienced this at one point or another. The mean people in our lives, ultimately, they gain a measure of control over our lives. And we don't even know it, but we're actually, begin acting just exactly like they do. And yet it feels in the moment like we have no choice. And then, at some point along the way, if somebody hears our story, if you were to like tell your story and you're talking about like how somebody was so mean to you and they said this and they did that, and this is how you reacted and how you responded, they'd probably be like, well, nobody would blame you. I mean, I would probably do the same thing because you feel like you have no choice. And the reason that we sometimes feel like we have no choice is because mean people, and we don't even think about this when we're in relationships with people, but mean people cause us to constantly be off balance. All right, and so oftentimes when we're around just really mean people, you might say something like, gosh, when I'm with him, I'm with her, when I'm with them, I just don't feel like I can be myself. And there's a reason for that, and it's because when you're around these kinds of people, you're kind of forced to compensate. All right, and what I mean by that is if I were to just kind of walk up to you and shove you, you're just standing there, I shove you, you would like lose your balance and you would have to catch yourself and compensate. And see, one of our problems is when we're off balance, we're constantly compensating. And so I want to kind of share with you a story out of my life a few years ago of a moment that I'm not proud of, but it kind of gives an illustration to how this deteriorates so fast and we can become the very people that we don't want to be. And so this is, I've been trying to keep it quick. This story about 6-7 years ago, our family, we traveled out west, up the coast, out in California, and we spent 4 days at Yosemite National Park camping. It was amazing for me. I don't know if my whole family felt that way, but we lived under a tent for the week. They had bear boxes because like if you had anything in your tent that smelled like a bear is going to find their way in. We cooked outside, showered outside, ate outside. I mean, I just thought it was amazing. The kids were ready to get back to the city, and so when we went back to San Francisco, we had a hotel for a couple nights, like a nice hotel that's going to remain nameless for obvious reasons in a moment. And so our last couple days in San Francisco, we got into the hotel about 9:30 or 10 at night. Now, we've been camping for the last 4 nights. And so we get into the hotel, everybody's just looking for a warm shower, they're looking for a comfy bed and a good night's rest, but that wasn't exactly in the cards. Because we checked in, everything went fine. We went to our room, we put our luggage in our room, and then we took the whole family back down and said, hey, we got one more set of luggage, let's all go grab it. It was basically all our clothes, everything smelled like campfire because we'd been camping. And so we went out and got the second load of luggage, and we came up to our room and hit the key card on the door, and it opened, but only about 2 inches. And this, I still to this day don't know how this happened, but the little like safety, lock that like swings when you're in your room to like lock the door, it somehow, when we left the room and that door slammed, that thing swung over and locked behind us with nobody in the room. And so we could open the door like 2 inches, but we couldn't get in. And, and that thing doesn't like unhook unless you shut the door all the way. So we were kind of stuck. And so I go down to the manager, at the front desk, and I just said, hey, we've got a problem, and I explained what happened, and he just kind of looked at me and laughed. And at first, I'm like, all right, well, what can you do? He said, well, sir, if you can go back up to your room and just wait up there, we'll send maintenance up here shortly. And I said, well, I don't know that you understand. Like, I've got 6 people in our family. We're all sitting in the hallway, look like we're homeless, like just a bunch of bags that smell like smoke. And we're sitting out in the hallway, like it's like 10 o'clock at night at this point. And he said, sir, go up to your room. I'll send him up as soon as, he gets here. Well, 15, 20 minutes pass, and he's still not there. So I go back down to the front desk again, and I call for the manager, and he's about as happy to see me as I am to see him. And I say, listen, we need you to figure something out because we can't, like the problem was we were stuck. Right? It's not like I could be like, hey, we're going to take our bags, we're going to go to another hotel. Like they've got our bags stuck in a room, and we can't get them, and there's nothing we can do until they get this door open. And he looked at me and he laughed again. He said, well, sir, this seems to be your problem. This seems to be a door user problem, which didn't set, I think it was the laugh that really didn't set well with me the second time. And so I had one of my kids with me, and I apparently just kind of went off, and I was like, no, let me actually tell you what the problem is. It's that you got a sucky, crappy hotel here that's really in disarray, and that's the problem. I'm kind of going off and saying all kinds of things. I don't remember, but my kids were telling me that these are some of the things that were said, and we kind of went back and forth, and I'm kind of going down and lower into his level, and before long, he finally reluctantly gave us another room, but the problem was we didn't have any clothes, and so I'm calling him, and again, it was just this epitome of being stuck. And so, he and I shared words, and, we're just like seething, and, we get a second room so we can get our family in a room, but like we don't have any clothes. We can't take a shower. So we're just sitting up there for like 2 hours waiting, because apparently the maintenance guy had gone to the store to pick up some supplies. And so here we are, and, we're waiting on him. And basically while we're waiting, and this is kind of embarrassing, but we're just sitting in the room thinking of the most, kind of devious, manipulative ways we could get back at this manager. I mean, I'm like, kids, you just trash the room. We're like, we're going to leave this place, and things that like we normally wouldn't say. And all of a sudden, in the midst of that, our kids are kind of looking at us. And I remember my wife saying, kids, I want you to go sit along the wall so you don't hear your dad have this interaction with the manager the next time he comes by. And so, I mean, apparently, it wasn't the best. And we, at some point, came to some reality and said, okay, what is actually going on right here? And who are we becoming in this moment? And we realized we were actually becoming, this guy was rude and mean and didn't have any empathy and just snarky in his, responses, and realized like I'm actually like acting just like him. And it had just kind of consumed us. And so next week in part 2, I'm going to come back to that story and kind of tell you how it's resolved, all right? Which I know you're like, oh man, why would you do that? Well, you're going to have to come back next weekend and hear like how this lands, all right? But the point is this. It's so difficult to be good to the people who aren't good, right? Like you've been there before. It's hard when you interact with people and they're just not empathetic or they're just mean. It's hard to kind of be good to them when they're just so insensitive. And like the golden rule just doesn't apply in that moment. And you know what the golden rule is, right? It's like this whole idea of like do unto others as you would want done unto you, which is great and everything until you get in a moment where you feel like I've been mistreated right here. I've totally been overlooked. They're snarky. This guy laughed at me. In that moment, and of course there were lots of complexities in this moment. Our luggage is stuck in a room. This manager, I'm sure he's got other problems, but he just felt like he's totally being inattentive. He laughs. I'm like, I just don't think, managers are supposed to be laughing at customers. And, and so I'm kind of like, I'm supposed to do unto this manager, as I want done unto me. No, we're the golden rule's like out the door right here. We're going to operate by the iron rule. All right, and the iron rule is do unto others as they've done unto you. All right, that's kind of the revenge story right there. All right, you do this to me, I'm going to get back, and we're just going to call this equal. And so, and the crazy thing is, we get to these places and we feel like we're justified, right? We feel like, okay, well, it seems right. And if I could tell you more crazy details, which I'm not going to, because a lot of them are just embarrassing, and the things that we thought, and the things that we said, and the things that my kids said we said, you'd probably go, well, yeah. That seems logical. That seems like that's even. You're just giving back like what he gave to you. It seems fair, right? Like that's the big 4-letter F-bomb we talked about last week. I don't like the word fair. And then there's this. Perhaps this kind of hits close to home for some of us as we think about, being overlooked and mean, and because maybe this is part of your growing up story, or maybe this is even a part of your, previous marriage story. That when we're mistreated in any kind of relationship, we actually feel powerless. That's how we felt in that moment. We felt like we're stuck. Like we can't just take our stuff and go. We're literally stuck in this moment. And in those moments, we end up compensating, but it's often not the person that created the difficulty or the meanness that we do the compensating with. What we do is we compensate somewhere else or with someone else. And so we take out our frustration on someone else that's not even a part of the equation, right? Like with, we can't take it out on him or her or them. And so, I can't, even though my work people are the people that are really mistreating me and being mean, I can't just take it out on everybody in the office. So we actually take this all out on someone else, and we do unto others as someone else has done unto us. And again, here we go. We're just in this never-ending rabbit hole, and it just spirals down. And so at some level, we've probably all been there at one point or another where you're just stuck and you're like, I don't even know what to do right here. And so the question we're going to be looking at, and here's what we'll be talking about over the next 2 weeks, is what do we do in this moment? When people are just mean and and I just feel like I'm stuck, what do we do in this moment? What do you do with the mean people? With my ex, with my neighbor who is just so mean, with my brother or brother-in-law or sister and sister-in-law, like the people who you just can't extract yourself from the situation, right? There's certain relationships you can say, okay, I'm out, never in doing this again, if this is how we're going to go. But there's certain relationships, it's just not that easy, but they're just mean. And if we're honest, it's fun to daydream about how, all the cruel things we can do, right? About getting even. But the problem, of course, is getting even makes us even, it has this way of actually making us even with someone that we don't even like. And of course, we definitely don't want to do that, right? Because, just kind of like in my store, I stoop to the place and my kids are like, hey, Dad, you're kind of like acting kind of like he is to you. And that's like the last thing you want to hear. And so what do? Of course, we could also ignore them. I mean, that's another option, but that doesn't work, right? Like, the reality is mean people, they have zero self-awareness oftentimes in those moments. I mean, people that are just mean, they have zero awareness of how their life and just their anger, it just meanness spills over into the lives of everyone around them. And if you ignore them, what they do, right? They just chip away. They just chip, and they just keep coming at you, and eventually you react. And the moment you react, it's like they have the upper hand because you stoop down to their level, and so ignoring them doesn't work. So if getting even isn't the solution, and ignoring them, doesn't really solve things, then what do we do? Well, fortunately, there's a third option. And I'm going to warn you, this third option, this one is not intuitive, all right? But this third option is the one that not only decreases their power over us, this third option is the one that actually allows us to protect our heart and our mind, and it positions us at the end of the day, and this is such a big deal, it positions us at the end of the day to be able to tell a better story. Now, as we look at this today, the way forward on this is taught both and modeled by Jesus. All right, and we're going to look at something Jesus said, just one little thing he said at the end of our time today. We're going to look at more at what Jesus said next week. But today, I really want to take a look at a story where this is modeled in the Old Testament part of the Bible by a relatively unknown figure. All right, and this is a guy whose life intersected with somebody you may have heard about before, a guy by the name of King David. Now, for many of us, if you grew up in church, even if you didn't grow up in church, you probably heard of King David. But this event didn't happen when he was king. This event also didn't happen when he was shepherd boy David. This event took place when he was fugitive David. All right, so David is a teenager. That's where he did the whole David and Goliath thing where he slayed the giant and, this big guy named Goliath, and he became the hero. And you may know the story if you heard it, from the Bible growing up, or maybe you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, how the underdogs and the misfits, how the art of taking down the giants. Either way, David takes down this giant, and so King Saul at the time, he actually kind of pulls David close because his mentality is, hey, keep your friends close and keep your enemies even closer. But then Saul, who's the king at that time, he gets word that some rogue prophet by the name of Samuel came along, went to David's house, and he actually anointed David the next king of the nation of Israel. Which is kind of a big problem if you're the king at the moment, right? Because you want to continue being the king. You want to continue your reign. And then when you're done, you kind of have these aspirations of, okay, my son, in this case, his son Jonathan. He wants his son Jonathan to take over the reign. And so this is like all messing with his dynasty. And so King Saul, he's like, all right, I'm just going to go out and kill David. And so David actually escapes and he becomes a fugitive. He's wanted by the king. And now he's living out in the wilderness. He can't live at home any longer. But because David has these mad leadership skills, wherever he goes, he just attracts people to him. And so he's living out in the wilderness as kind of a rogue outcast, but he has these other men that are just attracted to him, and they're kind of known as David's merry men. That's what they refer to in Samuel. And so David, has this growing group of men who have all kind of been outcast, who all kind of have a chip on their shoulder. They all have a story about how they've been mistreated by King Saul as well, and they've all kind of been running from the king. And so they're all out banding together, and it's growing by the hundreds. And so David has all this anger and frustration, and just like any of us, he wants to have a place to take that out, but he can't do that on King Saul because King Saul is untouchable. And so in this story, David finds a new victim. And so I'm going to read for us part of this story right here, and then we're going to stop, and we're going to pick up the rest of this story next time. All right, so here's what happens in 1 Samuel chapter 25. It says, a certain man in Moan, and so Samuel was kind of the biographer of David's life right here. It says, a certain man in Moan who had property there in Carmel was very wealthy, and he had 1,000 goats. Now, in the ancient times, when the ancient people heard this, they would have all gone, 1,000 goats. And you and I are like, what's the deal about 1,000 goats? All right, he says he has 1,000 goats. Think of it like somebody who has a garage with 1,000 cars. all right? And you go, whoa, okay. So he has 1,000 goats, and he has 3,000 sheep, and he was shearing in Carmel, and his name was Nabal. Now, this right here was sheep shearing season. All right, in ancient times, we need to know a little something about what sheep shearing season meant right here. And sheep shearing season was the time when wealthy people sheared their sheep and they found out how much wealthier they had become. And so it was kind of like when they got their profit report. So they'd shear all their sheep and they'd see how big their herd had grown. And so he's kind of getting this report on how big and how wealthy he is. Nabal, his name's Nabal. And it goes on and says his wife's name was Abigail, and she was intelligent and a beautiful woman, but her husband was harsh and mean in his dealings. And so in the Hebrew language, the word Nabal actually means harsh. It means surly. It means mean. In fact, that's what it says right here, harsh and mean. It even says it right here in the text. And it says, while David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was sheep shearing. He's like, hey, this guy's about to get richer. Right? He's about to see how much bigger his wealth has gotten. And so he sent 10 of his young men, and he said to them, go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. So when you show up, like say, hey, we come in the name of David. And then say to them, long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. That's like a good ancient, basically blessing or greeting when you show up to someone you don't know. All right, it's basically like saying, hey, I come in peace. And so he says, hey, give this greeting, and then I want you to share this message with them. And so here's the message that he said he wanted, his men to share with Nabal. When your shepherds were with us, they did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs went missing. In other words, while your shepherds were out growing your flock and they were watching your flock by night after night after night after night, during that season, our men were all around them. I don't even know if they knew that we were there, but we were there protecting them. We never stole anything from them. Right? And so there's this sense that David's kind of like, hey, you're profiting really big right now, and we actually kind of helped that out. We actually protected you so nobody was taking your sheep. We didn't take your sheep. We made no unruly other shepherds came in and took your sheep. And don't just take my word for it. He says, ask your own servants, and they will tell you, therefore be favorable toward my men since we come at this festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them. In other words, he's saying, Nabal, you're going to have extra. All right, you've grown. You're counting your wealth. You're going to have a lot of extra. And we actually, kind of helped. We protected you out there. You didn't know it, but we were protecting you. And so we just wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing with us some of that extra. If you do that, that would be great. And so it says, when David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name, and then they waited, and they waited, and they waited, and they waited. And so we don't know how long they waited, but it says they waited, and we don't know if Nabal came out and he's the one that said, okay, here's my response, or if he sent a messenger out. But the message comes out, and basically it says Nabal answered David's servant, and he was kind of like, who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Now the crazy thing is he knows exactly who David is. He knows exactly who David is. But he's kind of like, who does this guy think he is coming in here and telling me he helped me grow my wealth? And so he goes on. He says, actually, many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. He's basically like, hey, listen, he tells these 10 guys that are there on behalf of David, listen, your master, he's a nobody. All right, who does this guy think he is? He's a nobody. He's actually an outlaw. The king actually has a warrant out for him. He's like, I didn't need your master to help me out. I didn't need your master to protect my sheep. I don't need his help. And then he says, why should I take my bread and my water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to these men coming from who knows where? I don't even know where these guys are coming from. Just a bunch of unruly men living out in the wilderness. I mean, he's basically like, no, David, not helping you out. And so he's like, I'm not sharing with you and your merry men, David. And so it says David's men turned around and they went back. And when they arrived, they reported every word back to David. And David said, all right, well, we tried. Let's go on to our next project. That's not at all what he said. That's what he should have said, probably. Instead, he says, David said to his men, each of you strap on your sword. And so they did. And this is a really important little detail right here. And David strapped his on as well. In other words, David's saying, hey, you mess with me, and you're going to pay. That's what he's saying. It's about time for you to pay. Now, I think there's a reason that this author highlights David arming himself right here with his sword. See, David had a sword unlike any other sword. David's sword was actually a reminder that he didn't have to return evil with evil. That David's sword was a reminder that he did not have to take matters into his own hands. All right, just out of curiosity, anybody know where David got his sword? Anybody know whose sword that originally was? It was Goliath's. It was this beast, this man, this huge giant that he took down as a teenager. And after he killed him with a little rock and a slingshot, he took his sword. And so this sword is like a visual aid for David. It's like almost like a memorial. It's almost like God's promise and protection to David. It's almost like, hey, David, remember? You didn't even have to use a sword. This sword reminds you that, David, you're anointed. This sword should remind you that as a teenager, I sent my prophet, and he anointed you as the next king of Israel. This should remind you that you don't have to take things into your own hands. All right, if anybody on the planet right now, kind of should feel a sense of like, hey, God's with me, David, you should feel this. All right, you should, all you should have to do is just like turn to God and say, hey, God, I need your help, and know that God is going to provide for you. But see, here's the problem. David's hurt right here, and he's angry, and he can't see any of that. And that story about the sword and the memory with the sword, like that's all gone. He forgot that story, and he forgot God's provision because he's so angry and hurt. And see, here's what he does, and this is so predictable. He redirects the anger that he has toward King Saul, because King Saul is untouchable, and he directs it toward Nabal. All right, in fact, here's what it says next. About 400 of David's men, this is amazing, an amazing amount of men. About 400 of David's men went up with David. This is an overreaction of epic proportion right here. Right, there's about to be a massacre take place right here. I mean, you probably heard the phrase, hurt people, right? Everybody's heard that phrase before. This is an example of hunted people hunt people. That's what's going on right here. And so David sets out, and it's so interesting because Samuel gives us these little glimpses into the mindset of David every now and then. David begins to internally build up this head of steam. He begins to build his case. He begins to build this case and kind of justify what he's not 100% sure he should be doing. All right, you ever been there? You ever been in a moment where you're like, okay, here's what I feel like I should do, but I'm not 100% sure this is the right thing. Back when Julie and I were in that hotel room with our kids, I think it was Julie's idea. I think she was the one that said, hey, kids, just go start jumping on the bed as hard as you can. All right, we're going to pay this manager back. Go put your shoes on the pillows. Just walk on those pillows. Put some tissue in the sink. Run the water. Let's just trash this place. All right, maybe that wasn't Julie. Maybe that was me who, out of a little bit of anger, said that. All right, but when you're like, okay, I'm not 100% sure this house should be racked in, but this is what I'm going to do. That's what David's doing right here. Because what we begin to do is we begin to build a case for why we should get back, why we should take revenge on the person who's done so much to us. But here's what David says. He says, it's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. In other words, he's like, hey, look at all I've done for him. I mean, all the nights we stayed up. I mean, think all the ways we could have stolen from him as his flock grew. He didn't even know how many sheep he had until he counted them again. We could have got wealthy off of his herd. Look at what he did, though. David says, he has paid me back evil for good. And then he brings God into the equation right here. He says, may God deal with me, and may it be ever so severely, if by morning I leave one male of all who belong to him alive. I mean, David's like, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill his servants. I'm going to kill all of his sons. Nobody's going to treat me this way and get away with it. And we're going to pause the story right there, and we're going to come back to it next week in part 2. Now, just a quick recap so far. We have 2 characters, we have 2 responses, and we have no hero. All right, so we've got David and we've got Nabal, and we have evil for good. David, he did good, and Nabal responds to him with evil. And then David, he's about to respond with evil for evil. And then Nabal is somewhat maniacal. And then David's doing exactly what everybody expects. He's predictable. All right? And so who could blame him, though, right? You're like, I mean, sometimes that's just what you got to do. You got to respond with evil with evil. But if you remember, as we said earlier, that's not exactly the way that these resolve the best. And so there's a third option. We're going to talk about the third option in part 2 next week. But before we do that, I want to kind of set us up for this, all right? I want to set us up for being ready to kind of think through, okay, what's this third option? How do we do this third option? And I want to give you 4 questions to kind of process through, all right? 4 questions I want to send you with. And so these are part of your next steps this week. These are things you can write down. You can take a screenshot here in a moment. But 4 questions that help us think through, okay, how do I respond to mean people when they approach me? So here's the first question. Do you want to be even with someone whom you don't even like? And the answer to that, I think, is no, right? Because our natural response when people are mean to us is like, oh, I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to pay back what they did to me. But why would we want to get even and be even with the people we don't even like? So that's a good question right there. Here's the second question. Would you rather be ahead? Wouldn't you rather be ahead? Meaning, I don't think you want to get even with someone. I think you actually would rather be ahead of someone. Now, again, this is like really unintuitive right here. All right, because, when I kind of say this next phrase, many of us are going to go, oh, yeah, I mean, exactly. This is exactly, how it is. But here's how unintuitive this actually is. This is the only arena in life where you actually relationally pull ahead by refusing to get even. When somebody is mean to you, when you refuse to respond in like kind, it's the only arena where you actually get ahead. Because if you just respond the way they respond to you, guess what? You just stoop down to their level, right? And so it's only when we're the bigger person right here, which leads us to the third question. And this is a question we wrestle with quite frequently here at Crosspoint. We ask this question quite a bit because it requires a lot of introspection. But here's the question. When this story, this moment, it's kind of, in the history, in the past, and it's like a 2 or 3 sentence, summary of, hey, this big thing happened right here. Here's the question. What story do you want to tell? What kind of story do you want to tell? Do you want to tell the story that you ended up just like the person that was mean to you, and at the end of the day, you reacted and you responded, and you're like, oh, they got the best of me, and I tried to ignore them, but I couldn't do it, so I just went off, and then I just became just like them. I just don't think that's a good story, and I don't think that's the story we want to tell. And so this is a really, really good question for us right here. What kind of story do you want to tell? And then this fourth question is kind of the on-ramp to the solution. All right, this fourth question is kind of the on-ramp to pulling ahead. It kind of sets us up to step into a really uncomfortable space, which sometimes we're like, I just don't know that I want to step into this, but we know we probably should. Now, if you're a Jesus follower, if you're a Christian, this is one of those things that like we know we should step into. In fact, Jesus says, hey, you're actually required. Like, I want you to not just treat people like the way you want to be treated, the golden rule. He says, no, I actually want you to love people the way I loved you. I mean, he takes it to a whole different level. And so this fourth question, though, listen, all I'm going to ask, you don't have to commit to it today, all right? We're going to wrestle with this again next weekend. But I'm just asking you to start an internal conversation on this question right here. And here's the question. What would it look like to return good for evil? When I face those mean people, when somebody comes up and they are just so mean, they're so uncaring, they're so unempathetic, when they are snarky, when they laugh at me, when they make fun of me, what would it look like for me to return good in that moment for evil? Not just to refuse to act, right? Not just to like act in like kind, but actually to be kind in that moment. Right? Not just to refuse to be bad, but like to take the words of Jesus and say, okay, Jesus, I'm going to try to do what you want me to do right here. And sometimes, what Jesus says, we're kind of like, I don't know exactly what that means, but in this moment, he's like actually super, super clear. There's not really like much wiggle room in this one. So Jesus, here's what he says about this. He says, I want you to do good to those who mistreat you. I mean, there's not really like any interpretation in that right there. He's like, I just want you to do good. I don't want you to just forgive them. I don't want you to just ignore them. I don't want you to just, try to not be like them. I mean, that's not enough. He says, I actually want you to figure out what does it look like for me to be good to those who mistreat me. Because see, here's something Jesus knows. Here's what he knows about you and about me. Jesus knows that doing good to those who have been mean to us is the only thing that in the end is actually going to free us. And it protects our heart. Because see, getting even is predictable, right? He's like, don't do the predictable. I don't know that any of us want to be a part of the predictable story. He's like, no, I want you to write a remarkable story. And here's again why this is so important. Because see, What will determine whether or not the story that you choose to write when you interface with mean people, it's not what the other person does. All right? See, that's out of your control. You can't control the other person. It's actually 100% like right here. It's actually what you do. And see, our decision to not respond in kind, but instead to be kind, to say, okay, what does it look like for me to do good right here to those who have mistreated? I'm telling you, when you begin to say, okay, what does that look like? What kind of story do I want to tell? I'm telling you, this is where your story begins to look remarkable. So, this is your next step next week. I want you to take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. I want you to wrestle through these 4 questions this week. This is your next step on your connection card. If you're tuning online, you can mark this. I mean, I encourage you to say, hey, I'm going to do this week. I'm going to spend a little time just wrestling through these 4 questions and reflecting on these and saying, okay, what would this look like? What do I want in the long haul? What kind of story do I want to tell? And we're going to pick it right up here next time with part 2 of Mean People. All right, let me pray for us. God, this is so easy to talk about, and yet, man, so hard to do when we walk out of this place. And so, God, I just pray that as we go into life this week, as we, think about what it looks like to walk this out with our neighbor, what this looks like to walk this out maybe in our workplace, what it means to walk it out with a friend, perhaps even in our own homes. God, I just pray that you would give us eyes to see our circumstances the way you see our circumstances. God, I pray that you would give us ears to hear your whisper, When we ask that question, okay, God, what would it look like this week for me to repay evil with good? God, give us ears to hear your whisper, your nudging, your still small voice. And God, I pray that you give us the courage to actually step into that. Man, that is such a difficult place to step into. A scary, scary place to say, okay, I'm going to actually do good to the person who has hurt me. God, I just pray that you give us courage to know how to do that this week. Encourage to write a different story. So help us to do that. Amen. All right, now, here's what we're going to do as we close. The band's going to do a song that kind of reminds us of this. It kind of talks about the story. Like you and I, we have a decision this week, and as we prepare for next week, about what kind of stories do we want to tell. And so we're going to go a bit old school this weekend. You guys good to go old school? You like old school? Okay, yeah, we're going to go old school. And this is an ancient song, and so you may know this song if you've been around church for a while. If not, we've kind of made it modern, but it's a cool story that talks about, like, okay, what story do I want to tell? In fact, it actually says, this is my story. It's a song that says, hey, here's the story I want to tell. This is my song. God, because of what you've done for me, I actually want to tell a different story. When I think about your great love for me, I want to be the kind of person that extends that to other people. Now, here's what I'll tell you. If you're not a Christian yet, if you're not a Jesus follower, you're here checking things out, we are so excited you're here. I guarantee you, if you put this into practice this week, just return evil with good, I guarantee you your life's going to be better and you're going to be so much better at life. I guarantee you. But if you are a Christian, if you are a Jesus follower, I'm telling you, this is how you reflect God's light in the world right here. This is how we make the world a better place. This is how we combat the meanness in our world by saying, I'm going to tell a different story. All right, you guys ready to do this? All right, let's go ahead and stand to our feet. Let's sing this together. Let's decide, hey, let's share a different story.
Hey, guess what? You get to choose the story of your life. And if you're like me, I don't want to do predictable. I want my life to tell a remarkable story. So dig into those questions this week, and we'll pick it up right here next time. Now, if you'd like us to pray for you this week, perhaps you've got something going on or you just need some encouragement, text the keyword "need prayer" to 317-834-7373. And one of our prayer team volunteers will be in touch with you today. If you're a giver here at Crosspoint, I want to say thank you for your generosity through the Joy Box. Crosspoint is completely donor funded, and that means that every amount of money you give helps spread this message we've heard today and helps people understand Jesus. And if you're not a giver and you'd like to become one, you can donate to the QR code or through the Give button. And just know that when you donate, your generosity is what's writing these amazing stories into people's lives and helping them experience all the goodness, joy, and hope that comes out of this place. So thank you. Thanks for joining us today. We can't wait to see you next time for part 2 of Mean People and What to Do About It.